Hi there, Bob Brockway here. I'm going to do my best to show you how I put together these paper lifters. And here's a complete one. This 6-inch, weighs in at 22 gram, super light. It's got a very shallow angle, but it works fine. So to get started, and I'm going to, what I do, first of all, I know the size chamber I'm going to use it into, lifting chamber. And after that, like say it's a 6-inch chamber, so I'm going to make a size equal to the top plate diameter or less. I'm going to make one tonight, or the one I'm going to show is going to be equal to the top plate. I want to do some experiments with it anyways. But the very first thing I do, and I really hope you can see this, is that I draw out a full-scale cutaway version drawing of the entire. This is like a cutaway of the lifter, like this, and it's 1/2 of that. And this would be the height, this would be the radius, and then I work out the degrees and I make it actual size, and then I measure it and it gives me my dimensions that I'm looking for. My cutout dimensions, like for the top part of the disc, is 3 3/16. Then I measure out for the bottom and it's 1 3/16. It gives me a slight overlap, which is really what I want on the edge. I want the top cone part to be a larger radius, so the bottom cone fits inside it, just like you see in the finished here. You see this ring around here? You see how this is the bottom part of the cone and it fits inside. Alright, after you got that, this is going to come out a 10 degree cone on the top and a 20-degree cone on the bottom. And I also work out my center core. Now now that we have that, you're going to need this sheet to refer to, because that's got all your dimensions on it. And it's just made out of printer paper. I use printing paper. It's inexpensive and you get a lot of it, and you don't have to be afraid of ruining a piece or something. It doesn't mean much at all. So the first thing is the center core. Now I make them out of paper. I hope you can see this. Let me get this over here. This is the paper core, and it is made to ride over the shaft, and it slides quite easily. I didn't have one exactly the right size. I like them to be a pretty easy, no drag, and they're quite easy to build. I simply take a 1/4-inch rod. This happens to be a aluminum rod, and I put some tape around it to make it a little larger in diameter. That way I'm sure I'm going to have a nice loose fit, and it'll fit snug on here, but on a 1/4-inch side it'll literally spin. And it's just a strip of paper. I make them about 4 inches long, and this is also printer paper. And I tuck them in and start rolling them. And after the first roll, I start applying my handy dandy, and I like to use it as the stick glue. Get my coffee cup out of the way. And get the stick glue, and it works real well, and they hold up good. And that's how I make the paper cores. I usually make a half a dozen to a dozen at a time. That way I've got them around. And I keep a whole bucket of different sizes. I mean, I can go clear up to, this one is these larger ones were made for my early lifters, were 5/8 center shaft that fit over the CD cases, and that's why they're so big. Alright, put that aside. Alright, after you get the core, you gotta cut out your disc. Whoops, wrong folder. Here we go. And this is how I do it. I just use a compass for the diameter for the outside, and I have this little arc drafting circle maker, and that's how I put the 90-degree cross in there, and I set that up, and that gives me my center hole. That's how I draw them out. That's the actual size, and I make how many ever I need for what I'm going to do with it. And then when you get it cut out, now this is where I wanted to show the cutout. It is important so you can get the right cone angle, I call it, or the degrees in the cone that you want. Now how I do that, I got a fan going, so light things are going to start blowing around. How I do that is you have to go back to your drawing and you look up, because I've already figured it out. You have to figure out, like, the top cone from the center line of the cone, which I call a center line, is from there to the top of the cone is 1/2 inch. On the bottom cone from the center line, it comes down 1 inch. And that will give you very, very close to the angles you want. As you can see, I have a lot of all laid out for different size cone, lifters that I use. I use the same layout when I'm making the emitter cones for the thrust engines too. I always draw them out, see where I'm going to be, how much material it's going to take, and it's a great tool to have a blueprint or a schematic of it, the actual size. And my units are all small enough I can just draw them out actual size. All right, now let's say we're going to make the top one. I always take my pencil marks and I put them on the inside so they're not seen later. You just pull it over like that. Now, we were going to say the top part is 1/2 inch from that center line, center radius line. So we're going to say it's 1/2 inch. I built this. You can build one yourself. It's just a wood dowel, and I took some aluminum that I have used. This is just a real light gauge aluminum, and I wrapped it tight so it'll slide up and down on the dowel. And I just take a ruler. You probably can't, you may not be able to see it, but then you just pull this to a 1 inch. It gives you a 1/2 inch, and that's a 1/2 inch depth. All right, you let that sit there like that. And what I like to do is I just carefully size that up, and you only need to guess where it's going to be. You do as many as I have, you got a pretty good idea. See, I hit it pretty close the first time. It's just a little too proud, so I'm going to back that off until, oh, I lost my lap. There we go. There. when you just touch that, just touch it, see, it's just a little too much. Pull that back. Come on, you. It's not cooperating for me. Well, practice makes perfect. And me, I know the camera's running, so I'm trying to move this along. Which is probably not the right way to do it. Alright, there. And, well, what you do is you adjust the overlap until you get the right depth. And that'll give you very close to the angle you want. And then what I do, I keep a pinch on it, and I just simply take a pencil and I mark it on the inside. Like that. And that gives me where to lay in the glue. That's all that's used for. And I take the stick glue again, and I have what I call a dirty sheet, working sheet for glue, because glue can, so to keep the glue confined. And I just set it up like this, and then I glue this, apply the glue. And the nice thing about the stick glue, you do have some working time, and then you can just bring it back onto your mark and lay it down on the surface. Nothing wants to. There we go. And that's how you get the cone. And it works the same for the top part cone as it does the bottom. And that is how, once you get the two cones built, set them aside. You've already got your center core built. That's dried. You don't have to wait too long. Hour, half hour. You can go ahead and keep right on working with them. Alright, once you're done with that, now you got to assemble it. Now what we're going to do here, get things out of the way, I gotta show you the process for assembling. Now I've already put these two together, and I'm going to try to remove it. Of course it doesn't want to remove now. There we go. Alright. This is the bottom cone. The fan don't blow it away, but it's pretty warm in this part of the country right now, and I want the fan on. So, what you got, this is nothing more. I could use this for a support rod for an open chamber if I wanted to. In fact, I did. I ended up with extra ones. But after you can see it's glued, now we got to glue. You start with the top part of the cone. I like to start with the top part of the cone. Get out of the way, you. And you have to glue that to the paper center core. Now, this is how I do it. If you come up with an easier, better way, practice makes perfect. I built way in excess of 200 of these things over time, and I'm telling you, it gets better with practice. Alright, I happen to have this plastic disc. What this was an old something I saw in the kitchen nobody was using anymore, and I took it. This happens to be a PVC reducing fitting. I lay that right down there on to the base. I lay this on top. It gets it pretty square. Now the first thing you do is you slide. Now remember, these aren't glued together yet. So you drop the thing in, and it happened to work out good that it bottomed right there. And then I set my cone on top, just like you see, and then I use the old crazy glue, super glue, with a brush. This is what this particular brand builds. They call it crazy glue, and it's actually a super glue, but it has a brush applicator, which is really nice, and you get a lot less mess. I've already glued this, as you may or may not be able to see, and you let that sit, give it about 15 minutes, and then you can flip it over. You remove the flat disc, You can use any type of flat surface. The idea of that is to keep it square with the center rod. Then I flip it over and I leave the fitting on there, the PVC fitting, and I just kind of center it, and there you have it. Now it's upside down. Now you've already glued this together. Now don't worry, when you pull these together, it changes the center hole size. I want a 3/8 hole. Well, it isn't bad on the 10 degree, but the 20 degree or more, the hole really starts to get smaller, as you can expect. Well, I size that back. I simply use a rounded barreled ballpoint plastic pin, and I work that in there real easy. Just keep twisting it gently, and that'll bring it to size. And after you've done that, if you need to do it, you check it first. It comes down and it drops right on. Now you don't want to put a lot of pressure on this. In fact, you want to stay away from handling it too aggressively. Now I put the seams together. I try never to do that. Don't like to do that, because the seams are not, because they're double ply, 2-ply. By the time they glue and it sets, it distorts them, and it's kind of hard. So there you are, you're ready to glue it. Now you want to try, because the paper is pretty flimsy still, even though it has considerably more rigidity than it had when we started. You want to put some down pressure on it, not a lot. You just want to add some down pressure, and you do something like this. I know it, and you see, and now you kind of eyeball it and see if you got the same amount of edge sticking out all the way around. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if it's close enough. And then you take the brush applicator and you start and you paint that all the way around. I could do that here, but I'm not going to take the time. You do that after that dries and sets. Give it 15 minutes and it should be fine. And then you remove the down pressure weight. But don't use a lot. We're talking ounces or less, or you'll crush it or distort it so bad and it won't come back once the glue sets. And then you apply glue around the sleeve and the center of the disc. And when you're all done, it should look like that. Now you're going to say, well, the paper core is real long, because you see how close I have these trimmed on this one? Well, that's the secret. You trim it. And how do you do that? It's not very hard at all. In fact, it's not hard. I just simply take a rod and I set it in there. And I use a toenail clipper, believe it or not. You got a toenail clipper? Use a toenail clipper. And you can just snip that all the way around. Work it easy. Just take little snips at a time, and you can work it right down to where you just barely have any. Don't cut into where you glued, though. Stop at that where the glue, and you'll feel it. The glue is harder because I've actually got too carried away and didn't have any glue holding anything together when I was done. Well, that is how you do that, and you end up with a paper lifter. Now, when you're done with a paper lifter and it's all dry, I weigh mine. I have a little ounce and gram scale. It's crude. It's not digital. And I weigh them and I mark the weight and I know the diameter. I do that because I make so many different diameters, so I write that in. And I also put the year, and a lot of times I'll put the angle that I was trying to achieve. Like this particular one is a 10 and 18 degree. 10 degree here, 18 degrees on the bottom cone. It's just so I can compare them. When you're building more and you're trying different shapes and sizes, it's just a good way to keep a record, and it identifies it as that particular one. Now there is one other thing that I do. When it's all dried, and before we go put it in the chamber to try it, I take a needle, and it doesn't have to be much, just a needle of any kind, and I put a vent hole in it. You only need either one on the bottom or one on the top. Actually, I don't know if I put one in this. I don't even see one. But I do that really, although paper is porous, which it is, I do it so it stays equal inside and out. I think it's a big advantage. If you choose not to, let me know what happens over time. But anyhow, I never did poke a vent hole in it. Got one now. But you can poke a vent hole in it, and that will put you in the lifter business. Now I run all my lifters mostly with the Wimhurst generator, and the bigger ones I like to run on the Van de Graaff. So I hope that if you have either of those machines or access to one, even if you build one and take it to school, let's say, and the school has a Wimhurst, it'll work. And then you can demonstrate it and try it at work. And if you're fortunate enough to decide to go out and purchase a Wimhurst or a Van de Graaff, that it's even better. Then you can really start experimenting on your own and try different things. But that is what works for me, and that is how I put it all together. I don't think I forgot anything. I told you the center hole. I use punches. Oh yeah, on that center hole. When you're laying it out, if you don't have, I use punches. I have a set of punches that work real good. But if you've got an X-Acto blade or skill knife that's razor sharp, especially, you can cut out you can do a decent job. A little practice and some patience. Not impossible. Okay, that should do it. If I forgot something, drop me a message and let me know. I'll put it back in or mention it. But I think that'll do it. So there. Now you know how I put these lifters together. Talk to you later.